Hey everybody, this is Alchemist, and this is the second installment of the Cast with No Name. Still trying to think of a sort of catchy, memorable thing to call it, because SFV-Cast is kind of... It's not bad, but it's not great either. But there's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to try and get through it as fast, but as detailed as I can. We're going to see how that turns out, because... yeah. Anyways, we're going to start with a little bit of heavier stuff before we get on to the fun stuff. And you can probably tell that at least one of these things that I'm going to talk about is going to really piss me off just by looking at the video. Just by looking at the title of this, you can probably tell I wasn't very happy earlier this week with something that came out. But, we're going to start with a few bigger things to discuss, and the first one, and I started the first one with this, and now we're here at the second episode, and I'm talking about it again. This Friday, one of the reasons why I delayed this cast to re-record it is this Friday, Leonard Nimoy passed away. He died at 83 from COPD. He had long felt his health had been failing for a while before, however, and he had long felt his failing health was caused by old smoking habits. I think he had quit smoking for decades, but he felt that it had been enough to cause compound the snowball of health issues that he's been dealing with for a long time. And of course, everybody knows Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock from Star Trek: The Original Series, and it's actually a role that he was very reluctant to embrace, not on television, but with the fame that came with it. He was actually very reluctant for a while. He famously wrote, I am not Spock, and then later said, I am Spock. When he decided to embrace the sort of mark he had left in world culture. Like, this is how the world knew him. And you can either sort of, like, walk away from that and just sort of, like, live in your own shadow, so to speak, or you can embrace that. And so he eventually chose to do the latter, and the rest is history. There's a lot of people didn't know about him. The Young Turks touched on a bit of this. I'll touch on it, too. He was also an actor, in addition to being an actor. He was a director, an author, and a musician. He served for 2 to 3 years in the U.S. Army Reserve Special Services running shows for troops before becoming an actor. After becoming an actor, he became known as a rising star in westerns before being cast as Spock in Star Trek, which was also pitched. This was an era of television when it was in the love affair with the western. You saw the western all over the place, and that's how Star Trek was originally pitched by Gene Roddenberry to the networks at Desilu, was a wagon train to the stars. And as I said, he was reluctant to embrace the fame, the degree of the fame that came to him for being Mr. Spock. The saddest part is, from his final tweets, he likely knew the end was coming. He must have, if not the end, then he must have known something was coming, because his final tweet is incredibly poignant, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes so you can read it for yourself. The whole world seems to be in mourning of Leonard Nimoy, which is a testament to the cultural impact that he had, not just Star Trek in particular, but specifically he had on generations of people. In fact, Young Turks also goes into a story about when he was at Caltech, and people sort of expected him to know about various things because he had played Mr. Spock, and he was so indelibly ingrained in world cultural consciousness as this meter stick know-it-all, and as the story goes, supposedly he would often listen to what they had to say, had no idea what they were talking about, but he would often go, I think you're on the right track. And I'll put a link to the Young Turks video. I'm sure that they probably have the video up by now, and I'll put a link to the Young Turks video where they discuss Leonard Nimoy's passing, and yeah. I don't want to spend too much time on that because I already spent a great deal of time talking about Monteum's passing in the last episode, and I don't want this show to become the show of Muerte. But Star Trek, of course, had an incredible impact on my life. I used to do a show called Rise of the Red Shirt about a Star Trek game. I played Star Trek games since I was a kid. The first one was Star Trek for the NES, and though it wasn't particularly good, the second one I played was Echoes from the Past, Harbinger, The Fallen, Starfleet Command, on and on and on. So, Leonard Nimoy is somebody who has also had a big impact on my life as a result. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about that at the beginning of this show. He lived long, and he prospered, and he will be missed, essentially. So, let's move on to some good news. The FCC this week voted to reclassify the Internet under Title II in a party line vote. The Internet was previously Title II before major telecoms such as Comcast early in the 21st century lobbied Congress to reclassify it under Title I. What Title II means is that under Title II, telecoms will be unable to separate the Internet into the tiered plans that are similar to the cable model that they wanted, and they will be also unable to slow down competing services as they've been doing with Netflix. Verizon has their own streaming service, for example, and they've been basically holding Netflix's download speed for ransom, forcing Netflix to pay them money to not slow them down. This has already been happening. This is not something, we are not in a vacuum, this is not conjectural. This was happening. But under Title II, they will no longer be allowed to do that. They must treat every site the same, because now it has been reclassified as a public utility, which again was how it was classified before the industry lobbied Congress to change it to let them do basically whatever they wanted. And 10 years down the line, we've seen that whatever they wanted turned out to be incredibly abusive. So this is so I do understand that there's a lot of propaganda out there right now. The GOP majority in Congress is already trying to cripple the FCC for doing this. And before you believe the GOP's hype, before you believe Fox News, I want you to look up the people who are the most vocal about killing net neutrality, and I want you to look up who their biggest contributors are. Before you comment, before you throw a tirade about how evil net neutrality is, look up the congressmen who are crusading against net neutrality and look up who their biggest contributors are, and I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, if not all 10 times, you will find massive contributions from telecommunications companies such as Comcast or Verizon or AT&T, etc. This decision has come on the heels of the FCC choosing to voting to redefine broadband within the United States as 25 megabits per second, up from the previous 4 megabits per second. 25 megabits per second is about the global average for broadband. Now, of course, there are places with South Korea who would laugh at 25 megabits per second. They have gigabit speeds. But these two things are a big deal because for at least the last 10 years, the United States has been behind the rest of the world in telecommunications infrastructure. You have to understand, in 1996, the 1996 Telecommunications Act, the United States government was contracting telecommunications providers to replace our our copper wire infrastructure, which had been in the ground forever, was decaying, was expensive to maintain, and was incredibly limited in how much information could be carried across it and how fast. To replace that with fiber infrastructure that was sturdier, cheaper, didn't rot in the ground like copper would, and was much more efficient, a much more efficient carrier of information, of far more information at once. So this is something that they've been supposed to do since 1996. And what they did was they took the money they got from the government in the form of tax breaks, and they started using it for wave after wave after wave of consolidation. That's why there's only a few massive telecommunications companies with little to no regional competition. They ate each other. This is something I'll bet you'll never hear Ted Cruz say. He always talks about some Telecommunications Act from the 1920s as if that's still relevant to today's telecommunications. The FCC also voted to lift restrictions against local competition, allowing cities to develop municipal internet and removing the stranglehold large telecoms have had laying and utilizing fiber since the 1996 Telecommunications Act was passed. You see, they were paid by us. They're still being paid by us to lay that fiber, but they're not doing it. They're throwing a pittance to local infrastructure, and that's it. That's how they get out of it. So, a bunch of cities across the United States decided, hey, if they're not going to do it, we're going to do it. We're going to lay the fiber. We're going to start our own local ISP, a municipal ISP, so kids can do their homework, so people can still do their work online, and various city governments, state governments were lobbied by the industry again to prevent this. Well, the FCC has lowered the restriction, on that. So municipal internet can now be a thing. That means that these telecoms have competition, which, as Yanks, we're supposed to be about, right? We're supposed to be about that free market. Competition comes with a free market. So we're going to see how this turns out. Alright, let's move on from that stuff. One more thing about online policy making, and then we're going to move on to the good stuff that you see in the screenshot in the video description, in the video title. And that is, last cast, I mentioned starting a Patreon, but we've got a snag, something that I've been trying to work on, I wanted to talk about a little bit. And that snag is the EU basically is doing its damnedest to kill online digital transactions for digital goods. It's called VATMOS. It was legislation passed in December by the European Union, and it essentially forces content providers being supported by communities to provide personal information from each and every EU resident who funds them. No matter where that person is being funded, no matter where the person being funded is in the world, essentially. It doesn't matter where you live. There is a grassroots effort in the UK. There's some action. I'm not sure if it's grassroots or not. But there is some action going on in the UK to try and make the UK an exemption from this. We'll see how that turns out. But this even extends to ad space, so bloggers aren't safe from this either. Patreon, Kickstarter, Amazon payments, PayPal, just about everywhere is affected. You have to either jump the hoops, or don't have a Patreon at all, or just refuse all contributions and sales from EU residents. Those are your choices, and those are the choices that I have now with this Patreon. I wanted to start this Patreon to support my show on YouTube, and I wanted the Patreon to pay for hardware, pay for the website that I'm still planning. So now this is all sort of thrown out of whack by VATMOS. VATMOS makes no sense. Why would you do this? The worst part is it is only for digital goods and services. Physical goods and services do not apply. It's only digital. So this makes zero sense whatsoever. There is no sane reason No sane or rational reason for this insanity. Well, there's no sane reason for insanity, but there's no rational reason for this at all. This is complete nonsense. And there was just this massive tidal, like in December and earlier this year, there was this massive tidal wave of rage from the online community towards this. So I'm thinking if I'm going to be starting a Patreon, I'm going to have to look into a way to screen EU users. And if you watch my stuff and if you enjoy it and you're an EU user and you see this, I apologize. It's not that I don't appreciate you watching my stuff. It's not that I'm not happy you're enjoying my stuff. It's that's like having to let's say like 100 people from the EU contribute to a Patreon, or like your ad revenue. You have to supply information on that 100 people. That's only 100 people. Like now, like say 1,000. Now say 2,000, 3,000. Do you see where this is going? You have to file taxes with the EU for each of them individually. That is insanity. There is no reason for that whatsoever. There's no justifiable reason for that. So that's where I am. So if you're from the EU and you see this, and I've started my Patreon, and you're wondering why you can't contribute if you wanted to, that's why. And I apologize, but that's blame Brussels. So while I'm on that subject, tinfoil hat. Let's put our tinfoil hats on for a moment, because this goes back to what I was talking about just a second ago with like telecoms wanting to make a cable tier program, wanting to turn the internet into essentially cable, essentially like what they've done with the cable structure. The tinfoil hat is this: the cable structure was designed from the ground up to screw you. That's not the tinfoil hat. That's a fact. Like, the cable was designed to screw you. It was designed to nickel and dime you for everything you're worth. That was the point of the tiered cable structure. That would have been the point of the tiered online structure that ISPs wanted to do. The reason why they want to do that, why they want to turn the internet into like a tiered program, is to kill new media. Because old media is crumbling. We're watching old media crumble as we speak. We're watching like the most profitable thing. What are the most profitable things on TV right now? Network news. That's pretty much it. We're watching network news fall apart before our eyes. Just viewers going down and down and down. What is the most watched network news channel on cable? That's Fox News. How old is Fox News' audience? They're in their late 60s, early 70s. That's the average age of a Fox News viewer. Think about that. That's not unique to Fox News either. The audiences for CNN, MSNBC, the average age may not be as old, but it's up there. We are watching the crumbling of the old media in slow motion. And it's only going to get worse, because at CES this year, cord cutting, cutting that cable dependency and just having online media services like Netflix and Hulu, that was the star of the show this year. It took away the show at CES. CES is the Consumer Electronics Show, where they show off all the new stuff they're going to be marketing in the next couple years. So things like cable, old media, they're done. Their day is over. But that's a big problem for a lot of people. So that's why, if I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat and be like a sort of like conspiracy theorist, That's why you see this being done. That's why they wanted the ISPs in the United States wanted the tiered cable system, and that's why the politicians in Brussels have done this. I would be very interested, very, very interested in seeing what sort of contributions the folks in Brussels have been receiving and from whom. And I'm sure a lot of people in the EU are even more interested than I am to see where that's been coming from. Because there is no rational reason for this legislation, for VATMOS, and this stinks to high heaven, the whole thing. So we'll see where this goes. We'll see how long this legislation lives, because I can only imagine at some point a lot of people are just going to start cutting off the EU. They're just going to start cutting it off, because it's too much trouble to bother with, to market anything digitally to the EU. So we'll see where this goes. But it doesn't look good. Not for EU residents anyways. So if you're an EU business and you've been impacted by this, my heart goes out to you. This cripples startups. That's another thing that this does, is it cripples startups. It cripples people who rely on crowdfunding to live. There is no justification for this. None whatsoever. Okay, let's move on from that now. Let's get to the point. Let's get to what you're seeing on the cover. And that is this week, when Resident Evil Revelations 2 was released. And I'm looking at my show notes right now, and my show notes almost every other line for the next couple lines is, what the fuck happened? I may have been a bit upset when I was writing this. Let me try and make my thoughts a bit more coherent on this issue. I was taking notes eventually. That's how bad trying to play this game got, was I started taking notes. Now, it needs to be said that the console versions of this game are fine. On PS4 and Xbone, they run fine. We are specifically talking about the PC version right now. We're talking about the Steam version that was released on Wednesday. I think they were all released on Wednesday. Yeah, you know what I mean. The PC version is a botched console port. It is a horrifically botched console port. This was not developed for the PC at all. Like, the PC version was not developed for the PC. It was a console version with a few extra features put in and a bunch of features turned off, which we're going to talk about in a second. But this is a bungled console port. This thing is a train wreck. Let me describe my experience starting Resident Evil Revelations to you, and you'll start to see what I mean. Because they do a lot, because this game violates common sense immediately, and it violates it in a way that even console users should be upset. When you first run this game, you get to the title screen, you get two options: start game, quit game. There is no options menu. This makes it difficult to configure the game if you're on a PC, and if you're on a console and you have you're in a specific situation where you want to tune some certain things like brightness or what have you, and you want to be free to do that without having to start the game to do it, without having to start the game proper to do it. You just want to go in and put in some favorite settings and then just start your game. This is a big deal, that there is no options menu. Okay, so maybe I'll hit Game Start and it'll take me to a main menu of some kind. That happens too. You hit Game Start, it gives you a scant selection of options to very barely customize your game, like turning subtitles on, etc. Then it goes, so you click through that, okay, maybe can I get to an options menu now? I'm playing this on a PC, I would like to change the graphic settings. No. Now it goes to the intro cutscene, which, I'm going to be fair, was a very good intro. It established that TerraSave had gotten bigger. TerraSave was a NGO introduced in Resident Evil Degeneration. Claire Redfield was one of its leaders, or at least one of its founders, most likely. And she clearly has a bigger role in this organization than she had before. The events of degeneration are mentioned with Tricell. The events of degeneration and Resident Evil 5. The upcoming events of Resident Evil 6, this game takes place right before 6, are referenced. We get some great character stuff with Claire being in charge and talking to a few other characters involved in TerraSave. And we get some great character stuff out of Moira, where we quickly establish that she and Claire have been friends for some time. She's estranged from her father. She's a newcomer to this organization, and then everything goes south, and we're getting into the game proper. It was not a long intro. It did everything it was supposed to do, and it did a good job of it. But if you want to access an options menu, you can't do it before you watch the intro. You have to wait until the game starts. And if you want to be able to access the options menu when you start the game, you have to wait for yourself to be auto-saved after the game starts. Then, and only then, do you get to change your graphic settings whenever you want. This is asinine. That is ridiculous. Okay? There's a reason that the options menu is front and center. It's one of the first things you see in a game. You see start, options, whatever. This isn't just a PC thing. This is a console thing going back to the NES. There's a reason you see that. So let's talk about before I move on, actually, right before that intro was the longest fucking loading time I have ever experienced in any game ever. I am not shitting you. I had to sit through this intro screen multiple times, and I'll tell you why in a second. I liked this intro. I hated this intro after a while, but I liked it the first time. I thought it was really well done. The reason why I had to keep restarting and sitting through this unskippable intro over and over and over again. At least I think it was unskippable. It may have been skippable. The loading times were not. The reason I had to go through this over and over and over again was because the moment I could access an options menu, I hit pause, I went to options, and I tried to change the resolution, and the game crashed. I went through all of it again, went to options, tried to make the game windowed, and the game crashed. I went through all of this again, tried to turn off VSync, and the game crashed. We've got a bit of a problem here. This game is unstable as fuck. I eventually managed to do all this by scrambling around, searching my user folder, searching through the application data folders to find some kind of INI file that I eventually found and managed to change these settings. But I could only efficiently do it from the INI file because every time I try to change it now that it's windowed, the game hangs. It just stops. It just stops. Just kill the process. It's not coming back. It stopped. So I finally get all this shit sorted out, and I start playing the game proper, and then I start realizing that the frame rate is... I'm looking for a more polite way to say absolute garbage. I set the frame rate to 30 FPS. This wasn't 30 FPS. I would like to remind you that I played Ground Zeroes on this PC. Ground Zeroes runs at 30 FPS reliably. I can play Metal Gear Solid 5 on this PC right now, and it runs fine. I play Resident Evil Revelations 2, and I get FPS in the single digits. It blew my mind. I changed it to 60. I went from 30 to 60 to variable. They said, change it to variable to fix it. It didn't fix it. It was garbage. Variable made it worse. So I put all the settings down to nothing. I turned everything at off or low, as far down as I could put it, to see if I could get some kind of baseline to sort of dial it up from. No. Nothing I did changed the performance of this game. This game performed horribly the entire time I tried to play it. And there's a certain point at which you are chasing what I tentatively call a zombie. It's possibly a zombie. It's kind of a zombie Magini zombie, like a zombie, not like a not fish zombie from Revelations, sort of. You're chasing this thing through winding corridors, and then the frame rate dies. I'm not just talking single digits. I'm talking low single digits. And it stayed there for the rest of the time I bothered attempting to play this pile of shit. I eventually just fucking closed it. I closed and uninstalled the game. Just out of pure rage. When I couldn't find anything that I could do to fix this. And if you look at the Steam store page, there is an entire, almost every post is talking about how bad this game is optimized, how much of a botched port it is. What really pisses me off is you're not really seeing this anywhere. It's all talking about the co-op that was removed. That's the source of all the outrage from people playing this game on the PC. No, all the outrage from people playing this game on the PC is from the fact that it's a shitty port. And it doesn't fucking work. Allegedly, Barry's section of gameplay works fine. Unfortunately, I have to play through Claire to get it. To get to it. The worst part is, by all accounts from PS4 and Xbox One users, there is a great action horror game. This is a great game. Unfortunately, it doesn't run well enough for me to enjoy it in any capacity. It's just a pile of shit on Steam. Do not purchase this game until they have fixed it if you have not purchased it already. Just don't. Even worse than the battle of wills that setting this game up was, even worse than that was the fact that Capcom went on and on and on about how they didn't have time to implement local co-op in the PC version. Well, we know that's a bunch of bullshit now because some modders enabled it. They enabled the local co-op that Capcom said was not in the PC version. They just turned it on. Much like in SimCity by EA, when somebody just turned on offline single player. After EA and Maxis went on and on and on about how it had to be online to work. This port is a mess. This port is garbage. I'm glad I didn't pay full price. I got a 20% discount on this game. I paid like $19 on it. For the complete season from Green Man Gaming. So I didn't pay full price. I'm glad now that I didn't pay full price for this pile of shit. I'm really disappointed in the dev team that made this. Resident Evil Revelations 1 works fine on the PC. There's sensitivity issues. Oh, certainly there's sensitivity issues. That's the biggest problem with that game. But it's manageable, and it's a fun game. It's a good game. And it works. You can run it. I was running it on my old PC, and it's far less powerful than this one is. The minimum requirements for Revelations 2 are not much above the requirements for Revelations 1. We're dealing with the same engine. We're dealing with what looks like barely up-resed assets from the HD version of Resident Evil Revelations 1. We're looking at the same graphical quality here. So why does this game run like garbage? This is unacceptable. This game is a piece of shit on PC. So if you go to the show links, there's a link to a list of the things which can break when running the game. In fact, I'm going to bring this thing up. In fact, no, I'm not, because I'm on a time limit here. I'm just gonna load this into a tab and just give you a rundown on what can go wrong. What can go just abysmally wrong with this game? Come on, load. I'm in the middle of uploading the Dragon Ball Xenoverse footage, which is why this is taking so long to load. Okay, let me just read down the list here of the stuff that people are reporting goes on. They can't download the game. I had this problem. I preloaded the game, and then I tried to start the game, and it turned out that it had not preloaded completely, and no amount of manual patching would fix this until I restarted Steam. Just completely exited Steam and restarted it. Files were missing. People have gotten messages saying that some files failed to validate and will be required. So again, people who preloaded it or downloaded it after purchasing it, they apparently didn't get all the files when it finished downloading. They had to re-download the game they had just downloaded. People are getting like DLL crashes when opening the game. People are unable to run the games on their laptops. For people, the game is crashing on the startup screen. I never got this problem, thankfully. Not that it makes much difference, seeing as I can't play it because it's a miserable experience. The game constantly stutters and freezes. Oh, yeah. You can't change the resolution. They tell you to change the resolution by going to the INI file, but they don't tell you where it would be. And number 8 especially is good. Random crashes to desktop, and blank screens on startup. I'll have the link in the show notes. You can look on the website for yourself. And they're trying to help you with these problems. But the number of people still complaining about these problems tells me that this is just a shitty game. This is a shitty port. And that's incredibly disappointing. From this side series and from the development staff making it. Just sad. The state of this game is just sad. This game was a pile of shit. I was crushed at how bad this was. And I was extremely worried because just a day later was when another game that came out that week that I was incredibly excited for was to be released, and that was Dragon Ball Xenoverse. So I was incredibly nervous. I was like, oh, I need this. Please don't suck. Please don't suck. Well, I'm happy to report that Dragon Ball Xenoverse does not suck. And where did that day go? Let's talk about something happy. Where did that day go? I probably marathoned it twice in as many days, and like between them, like 24 hours straight. Like I have been playing this game a fuck ton over the last couple days. It was released about 6 p.m. Thursday. Like you could preload it. So I managed to get in right off the bat and play this game, and I am enjoying the hell out of it. This game is great. It's got its flaws, but those flaws are far outweighed by the quality that we're seeing out of this game, and I really hope, like, if this is how Dragon Ball games are going to be, oh, I so hope this is how Dragon Ball games are going to be from here on out. This game is awesome. This this game deserves a fucking sequel. Right off the bat, if this game does not have a sequel, in 3 or 4 years or so, I will be very, very sad. I'm saying 3 or 4 years because I expect people to be playing this game for a while. Especially on PC, where people have already been modding the Japanese version. We're already seeing game mods. Oh, I can't wait to see what kind of mods pop up in this game. That's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. So let's go down the list of the pros and cons of this game. The character creator is incredibly robust. Much more so than I expected. There's a lot of freedom to create and develop the character you want to be. You have about 6 or 7 categories of stats you can spec into, and you're given a lot of freedom to specialize or not specialize as you choose. You can basically build any kind of character you want to build for this game. And when you're talking about a game with lots of fighting mechanics, that's a big deal, and it's a big deal here. As far as customization goes, the clothing options are a little disappointing, but they're not terrible. You can deal. Mostly, it's just a lot of costume pieces from Dragon Ball characters that can't be customized, which is disappointing. That's the part that's disappointing to me. It's I was hoping there would be at least a few more simple costume pieces. I have not seen anything so far so simple as a T-shirt. Let me put it that way. There's nothing. There are no pants. There are gi. There are the bottoms for a gi, but there are no pants. There are no shoes. There's nothing. If you're just trying to make a character who is not a martial artist specifically, is just kind of a person who fights evil, is just sort of a dude. That's kind of a common thread of characters that I like to make, is that they're not the heroic sort. They're just sort of like dudes. They're just sort of they're that guy, as John McClane would put it. They're just like that guy who's there at the right time, who can do something about something even when they're not particularly happy about it. They're not self-serving, but they're not selfless, but they're not entirely self-serving either. They'll help out if they can, or if there's anything they can do, or if there's nobody else to do anything about it. Those are the characters I kind of like to play, and I like to play that one here, but I can't really get the look going for him. And I initially started trying to bullshit away for a Forgotten Realms character to end up here, but I kind of trashed that idea because I was hoping that Trunks' combat abilities would be available earlier on, but it just wasn't working out that way. So I kind of broke him down and started over with a completely new character. As far as the combat goes, it can be spammy, but so was Dragon Ball Z, if you've ever watched it. But it feels great. It feels, even though it's got a couple glaring flaws, the feel of it is great, especially once you've got your character built and you got the abilities you prefer set, and you're kind of getting into a rhythm of how you use your techniques and how you chain them together, and what ones you use in certain situations, and how you can use them to steer the combat in the direction you want it to go. It feels great. My one complaint about the combat as it is that grabs and holds could be less weird to pull off. I prefer using like a strike ability, which is basically just like a physical ability to like chain throw them or something, to throw them and to throw somebody instead of using the actual throw mechanic, because the throw mechanic, when you're in a pinch and you got to get it off right away, just doesn't feel reliable. So I just use like meteor strike or something, or not meteor strike, but meteor like throw or meteor drop or whatever it's called. Or Orin combo, which is a technique you learn from Krillin, which is a really great one too. Although it's problematic for you because once you use it, you drive them into the ground and then they have invincibility frames. So again, very situational. It's a very good game, surprisingly lengthy. Again, I have not even come close to finishing this game. I am taking my time through it, and I am enjoying the hell out of it. It feels like a cross between Phantasy Star Online and Urgeist almost, or Power Stone. It's really good. It feels. This game is right up my alley. Like this game is what I do basically. One of the problems though about like. It's got a lot of content, but these parallel quests could be more fluidly incorporated into the actual gameplay, because leveling can be a pain. It very much takes the Dragon Ball formula of training diligently. Like that's sort of like a running theme of the series is rising to the occasion and like preparing yourself for the greater and greater odds that you face. It's a running theme of the series, and this game echoes that by making you grind parallel quests forever to level up, to add to those stats that I mentioned previously. Although there are a couple ways you can do this easier. Namek Explosion, I found, is perfect for gathering Dragon Balls and leveling up to about level 35. It's great. Of course, this requires you to have already unlocked it, but once you have, Namek Explosion is a great way to go about it, and you can use the Dragon Balls to like automatically gain a level anyways. Although, if it's your first few times using the Dragon Balls, you're probably going to be better served wishing for more characters or unlocking the things that can only be unlocked through the Dragon Balls. You're probably going to be better served doing that first. But Namek Explosion is a great go-to for it. The Preparing for the Saiyans mission, I forget exactly what it's called, is also an easy-ish way to do it. After you beat Yamcha, Tien, and Krillin, look around for a Time Patroller. If you do not see a Time Patroller, restart the mission. And beat them again and look around again. Eventually you'll see a Time Patroller. And when you defeat that Time Patroller, if it says you get a key item, you got a Dragon Ball. Go ahead and finish the mission. If not, restart the mission, try again. It takes a long time and a lot of patience that I don't have. But Namek Explosion is a much more reliable means of obtaining Dragon Balls, especially if you can solo Frieza and barbecue him within seconds, as you can pretty much once you get your first ultimate attack. The story can be a bit hard to follow for those not familiar with Dragon Ball, but that's why there's like Dragon Ball abridged in TV tropes. So that's not going to be a big problem either. I can say just if somebody is like can't follow the story, just steal them to Dragon Ball abridged. Just send them over there and just let them have a good time watching it. The game also seems to be having server difficulties though, which is understandable considering how many people probably jumped on this train. So to avoid waiting when starting play with Steam, you can set Steam to offline mode, and you'll just start it immediately. You won't have to wait for the server, or disconnect from PSN or Xbox Live, and that's for when you're just training or playing through the story. Just do that. In conclusion, I highly recommend it, but don't go in expecting a pure fighting game. That is one thing this game is not. So, following up on the Kickstarter I talked about last time, Shadowrun Hong Kong busted through its $1 million goal and kept going for at least $100,000 more. So the game will have 2 complaints. One will be downloadable, and will be free to anybody who backed. So I'm raising my hand right now. That's great. Shadowrun Hong Kong is one of the games I'm looking forward to this year, alongside Xenoverse and Revelations 2. And Phantom Pain, which, although I don't really have it on any authority that Phantom Pain is coming out this year, that's mostly just like the hopeful hopeful mumbling of some of my friends, you know who you are. One in particular, who are in denial that this game will come out in 2055. Yeah. I'm not expecting it. I'll be pleasantly surprised if Phantom Pain comes out this year, but I am not expecting it this year. So finally, George R.R. Martin is the author of the Song and Fire books, or a song. A Song of Ice and Fire? Yeah. I thought I gotten that wrong for a moment. He's the author of a song of the Song and Ice and Fire books. Song of Ice and Fire. That seems wrong to me for some reason. A Song of Ice and Fire. No, that's right. Why do I keep feeling like that's wrong? He's the author of that book series, the series that the HBO show Game of Thrones is based upon, and he recently has stated that the show from this point on is going to be different from the books, meaning that characters' fates are now completely up for grabs. And the reason for this likely is because the last 2 books of the A Song of Ice and Fire series are taking forever to write. Now, allegedly, he has provided an outline of those books to the show's creators, or to the show's producers and writers, etc., so they know where the books are going, and an ending has been prepared if the series outpaces the books, which looks like it is set to do, because we are going into Season 5 this year, and there are very few books left to adapt. We have pretty much gone through almost all of the ones that have been written. So I thought that was a very funny situation. I believe he provided it to them, or at least I've heard that he provided the outlines in case like he has suffered from sudden creator death. So we're gonna see how the show goes now that it's no longer featuring following the book's outline, especially how the fate of Tyrion goes. Like hearing that news that like all the characters' fates are up for grabs makes me especially like afraid for Tyrion, because the writers of this show and the writer of the books for that matter can be psychopathic bastards. So please don't kill Tyrion in Season 5. I haven't read the books very much either, so I don't know if he survives in there either. But I'd really like it if he did. Seeing as he's like one of the few people in Westeros who I do not want to see die. Would that be a good way to say it? Like, he's one of the few characters in Game of Thrones I don't wish a painful death upon. So please don't die, Tyrion. Also played by Peter Dinklage, who does a kick-ass job on Game of Thrones, even if he phoned in Destiny. Okay, so that's about it for all the topics that I wanted to cover. I went through them pretty fast because I wanted to get this out there today. I took a break yesterday when I heard the news about Leonard Nimoy. And so I do have a few questions, though, to answer. I got a few questions on the site and in the comments. If you're going to ask a question, just leave it in the comments. leave it in the comments for this video so I can keep track of like where they're being asked. Like either in the comments here or in the comments on the where the show links are posted. Like on the blog post with the show notes. Leave it there too, just so I can keep track of these. Hey Alk, are you going to do an X2 roundtable? Asks Toy Bonnie. Toy Bonnie, no. An X2 roundtable is probably not going to happen because I've been having these problems connecting to Cryptic servers for a while, and it has to be something somewhere down the pipes between here and Cryptic. Because I have literally changed out everything, and the problem has persisted. I've changed the computer. I've changed my wireless adapters. I've used multiple wireless adapters. I've changed the positioning of the wireless router. I've changed the wireless router. I've changed the Cat6 cable from the wireless router to the broadband modem. I've changed the broadband modem. I've changed the Cat6. And I've changed the RG6 cable from the wall to the modem. So I've literally changed everything. And I've spoken with the ISP, and again, as I said last time, according to them, the signal's going through 5x5. So it's got to be something between here and Cryptic that's causing this. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it so far. I'm still looking into it, but I have not had a chance. I've not had any hands-on time with X2 aside from using some saved-up dilithium the day it launched to upgrade the Waglinde to a Tier 6 fleet exploration cruiser. That's it. That's about it. So I don't have the hands-on time that Lord Ice or Andrew would have. They've wanted to do a round table. I could host one if they would like, but I wouldn't have anything to contribute to it. See, Deluxe SP asks, Al, can you tell me your favorite top 5 games, your favorite color, and also if you like colorful things or like dimsel-colored things? Well, in order. First of all, like asking me what my favorite games are is kind of like pick a genre because there's too many. Like that's a whole nother series of videos. Like that would take forever to go through. But I'm gonna go ahead and pick a genre and give my favorites in that genre. So these are going to be listed in no particular order, and the genre is going to be RPGs. And right up front, Final Fantasy is disqualified for being Final Fantasy and being on every list ever. No. So I'm going to start off with Neverwinter Nights. Neverwinter Nights was developed by BioWare in the early 2000s, and it is a CRPG very much akin to Baldur's Gate. It's an Infinity Engine game, I believe, which is very combat-oriented, and it was built on the D&D 3.5 hardcore rule set. Or at least 3.5 in general, actually, because they were building a lot of games on 3.5. They built Knights of the Old Republic on 3.5. So, yeah. Like Knights of the Old Republic Jade Empire, I think, was built on 3.5 as well. So yeah, Neverwinter Nights was built on D&D 3.5, which is supposed to fix the problems people felt AD&D had. But it also had a selectable difficulty that was D&D Hardcore, which is Hardcore 3.5, which had stuff like permadeath, and basically turned the game into a roguelike. Fantastic game. Even the first campaign, even though it's incredibly cookie-cutter standard RPG fare, or standard, like, tabletop RPG fare, it's basically a big starter module. And it was still great. Like, it was still a fantastic story, even if it wasn't particularly well-written or inventive. It was still an incredibly fun time, and the next two expansions, Shadows of Undertide and Hordes of the Underdark, blew it away. Hordes of the Underdark especially is one of the best RPG experiences I have ever had. It is phenomenal. It goes into Planescape Torment territory. Now, even though I didn't particularly like Planescape Torment, would not be on my favorite list of RPGs, but the writing in that game was phenomenal, and that's going to be a common theme in this list is incredible writing. Neverwinter Nights has it. You can pick that up at Good Old Games. I recommend you do. Play the hell out of it because it's great. You can skip the original campaign if you want. All it's going to do for Hordes of the Underdark is tell you who a few characters are, and you can get to know them in Hordes anyways, and they'll tell you that stuff anyways. So just go ahead and play Shadows and Hordes, and just pick up Neverwinter Nights. from good old games. You can't go wrong with that game. It's really good. Second is Shadowrun Dragonfall, Director's Cut. Dragonfall shook. Fucking... Where am I even going with that? You can tell I'm in a hurry because I have no idea where I was just going with that. What did they say? Shook the heavens? Is that how Hairbrain Screams? Yeah. Described Shadowrun Hong Kong as they really shook the heavens? That's what Dragonfall did. Dragonfall did it first. He was widely praised for having an incredibly immersive world, an incredible story. Again, fantastic writing. Great characters with some of the most deeply fucked up backstory you will ever hear. And just this great combat that they built for Shadowrun Returns and improved for Dragonfall. Dragonfall's combat is far better than Shadowrun Returns' combat was, and from everything I've heard, Hong Kong's is going to be even better. Dragonfall Director's Cut is one of those games where it only costs like $15-16. It's one of those games where like you hear somebody hasn't played and you're like, why the fuck not? Like, if you're a fan of lore, there's so much of it. If you're a fan of RPGs, if you're a fan of noir or cyberpunk, or just like shoot bangs, because there's plenty of shoot bangs in this game. Not first-person shoot bangs, but shoot bangs. Trust me. Then it's like, why the fuck haven't you played this? So Shadowrun Dragonfall, number 2. If you haven't played that one either, go do it. In fact, assume that for everything on this list. If you haven't played it, go fucking do it. Why the fuck not? Next on the list is Wild Arms 3. Now, Wild Arms 2 is more lighthearted and fun, and I have to say lighthearted in sarcasm quotes because Wild Arms gets awfully heavy. When Wild Arms 2 gets heavy, it gets fucking heavy, and it does it fast. But Wild Arms 3 is a much more mature story, with much more evolved combat mechanics, and much more entertaining fights to watch, to be honest, which is important if you're playing a turn-based JRPG. Almost everything about Wild Arms 3's story and characters is subversive, though, in such a way that was incredible for the time, and still is very refreshing. Because the time Wild Arms 3 came out, the JRPG the genre had boomed and begun to bust. Like, there was a point during the PS2 where you started seeing the JRPG-style game less and less and less and less and less, and certainly nowhere near the explosion of popularity they had on the PlayStation following the release of Final Fantasy VII, when everybody and their dog started releasing JRPGs on the PlayStation. Wild Arms 3, the main character is female. The main character is reasonably attired. You meet your 4-player quartet fairly early on. The big guy is your squishy mage. Like, there are so many subversion, like both little and large subversions of the RPG formula. Like, there was a long streak of nihilism in RPGs where the moral of the story would often be that one had to like surrender their ideals to survive in a cruel world. Wild Arms 3 took one look at that and went, hell no, and the story instead became a story of a very idealistic young drifter named Virginia and her accomplices, essentially, maturing their ideals to survive in this harsh world, rather than abandoning their ideals completely. And as you go on this journey with them, you see this slow evolution of characters that was also absent from a lot of other RPGs. A lot of characters started becoming really cookie cutter as the JRPG boom went on. Wild Arms 3, the characters were always fantastic. In fact, some of the bosses are incredibly well loved. Particularly Janus, I believe is his name. Janus, not Janus. Janus. Are particularly well loved for not just being really fun characters, but really well developed characters as well. So Wall at Arms 3, again, really great writing. If you haven't played it, why the fuck not? It's got a... This is also a game with a world map in a time when those were abandoned. Like, I'm just like, this is long after Final Fantasy X gave up on world maps entirely for just like a drop-down list. Wall at Arms 3 not only had a world map, it had one of the biggest ones I had seen in a JRPG, and it was packed with stuff to do. I remember like wandering the map looking for Millennium puzzles because I thought they were so fun. I remember like traveling on through this world that's basically Planet Gunsmoke from Trigun in like sand steamers, like giant like sand ships to like sail sand seas because this planet's environment is a fucking wreck. You know, and you know, like you still get in combat when you're using vehicles and on horseback, and that was a fun thing too, is getting into fights on horseback and watching those unfold. And then of course you get your giant sentient dragon gunship that launches missiles at everything, which was also really fun to watch. But yeah, Wall at Arms 3. If you haven't played it, fucking go do it. Do it now. The height, I would say, not hyperbole, the best entry in that series. Hands down. Go play it. Number 4, again, these are in no particular order, is the Elder Scrolls 2 Dragonfall? Daggerfall. I'm getting my wires crossed. The titles are similar. The Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall. It's the sequel to the Elder Scrolls Arena, so it still carries over many of the gameplay mechanics of Arena, particularly also because this is before the big debut in 3D and with Morrowind. And one thing you can say about Daggerfall is Morrowind may have kind of nerfed the Elder Scrolls a bit in terms of immersion, because Daggerfall, you are kicked into the main plot by Emperor Septim, who sends you on a mission to Daggerfall. I forget what the main plot even was. That's how little, like, I stopped. Like, once you get into Daggerfall, you can do whatever the hell you want. You don't even have to touch the main plot. Unlike in Skyrim, where as much as they say you could waste hours never touching the main plot, you will eventually touch that main plot. That is not the case in Daggerfall. Once you are let loose in Daggerfall, you are free to go wherever you want in any of the provinces you want. You could travel all across Tamriel, and it was all realistically not modeled out, but measured. Miles were miles, and you could travel all across just continents. You could, like, hire ships, like, buy horses to, like, travel. The locations of dungeons, the layouts of dungeons were completely randomized, and you could do whatever the hell you wanted. I'm serious. Buy houses, just whatever. Like, every immersive mechanic that you see in, say, like, Skyrim, Daggerfall had, and with a much larger world to explore. Daggerfall was also the first game to have the Skyrim style, or the typical Elder Scrolls style, leveling system. So if you like Elder Scrolls and you want to play a big version of Elder Scrolls, it doesn't require mods to be just the biggest game you've ever played. Skyrim is great. I love Skyrim. You can, like, mod the hell out of Skyrim, turn it into basically whatever you want, but Daggerfall is by far the much larger and just more deeply immersive game. So you can get Daggerfall free from Bethesda's website. I highly recommend you do. It's a fantastic game. And finally, the last one, even though this trilogy ended horribly, this trilogy ended god-awful, and just the massive shitstorm following its final installment is the stuff of legend already. And that is Mass Effect 1. Just the first Mass Effect. Don't buy the others. Just buy the first if you've never played Mass Effect. Buy the first and then rest easy knowing that you've played the best in the series. While it's true that I think Mass Effect 2 edges the first out in terms of role-playing mechanics and character writing, with the interrupts and the loyalty quests and getting to know your squad mates in the second one. The second one revolves almost entirely around this cast of characters you have to build around yourself to survive a suicide mission. Mass Effect 1 is the more, in its totality, superior game. Again, better writing, a more developed world. Just the entire purpose of the first game is world building, and it does it incredibly well, allowing you to explore so many different planets, even if they are largely like stuff that would have come out of like some Terragen maker. At least they are still there. Incredibly fun combat. Mass Effect 1 was the full package as far as RPGs went. And the freedom to be whatever character you wanted was what the entire game was built around. In an awesome, in an awesome, somehow not cheesy 70s, 80s sci-fi universe. The first time I played when I played Mass Effect, I fell in love with this game. I fell in love with the first Mass Effect. I love the synthy soundtrack. I love how 80s everything is. Because this is the stuff I grew up with. It's just like the stuff I grew up with. This game, that game is fantastic, though. Not just on nostalgia value, but on its own merits. A fantastic game. An amazing RPG that if you haven't played, you owe it to yourself to play. At least once. And then never buy the sequels. Because unlike the sequels, Mass Effect shipped with its full plot. And that's all I'll say about that. You want me to talk about the horrible things done to Mass Effect 2 and 3? I'll make a separate vlog and talk about that if you guys want to hear it. Because, holy shit, did those games get fucking ripped to pieces. But, I don't want to do that right now. Mostly because it would take forever. But also because I want to end this not angry. I'm going to play Xenoverse later anyways, but whatever. I'd cheer up anyways, but I'd rather not be angry right now, I guess. I vented all of that with RE, with Resident Evil. As for the other questions, do I like colorful things or like dimsel-colored things? Well, reality tends to be fairly colorful. I've got a bright yellow tape measure right here. It's cool, I guess. So I guess reality's cool. I don't have a problem with things that are colorful. What the hell is a dimsel? what is dimsel a color? Is that like hazel? Is that like the laser yellow that you would get in a box of crayons as a kid? Like you would look at it in yellow and go like, what's the difference between these two? Because I don't really know what dimsel is. Sorry. Is it glorple? I'll bet it looks like glorple. Is it glorple? Blurgurple? Bluraglurple? Something along those? Tell me what a dimsel is. Moving on. Our last question is from Hakura. Let's see. I wanted to know your opinions of team-based multiplayer games such as World of Tanks and War Thunder. If you played or had any interest in them. I know you like Halo, but neither of those games have unlimited respawns, so the dynamics and combat change. I have not played either of those. Here's the thing about online matchmaking and team games is I like to bring people I know, and if I that's basically it. Like that decides the whole experience. Is I like to bring people I know, and if I don't know anybody in this game, and if I don't have any experience with anybody in this game, it's gonna be tough, and it's gonna be tough to sell me on that because it's after seeing how enduring, how downhill Halo 2 matchmaking went, and how quickly downhill Halo 3 matchmaking went in terms of the number of douchebags you run into. Because you always ran into douchebags in Halo 2. But at a certain point, the lobbies were filled with them. Like if you weren't running into douchebags, you were running into standbyers or modders, and there was a point where Halo 2 matchmaking just sort of died. Where there really was no more fun to be had here. It was mostly just because you weren't going to let the servers die, more or less. But yeah, that more or less, like, the quality of, like, a team-based game, for me, is almost entirely determined by the people I am playing it with. Are they people I know? Are they people who are good at the game? Are they people who are douchebags? That's it for me. That's one of the things that, like, sells me on a game most of all, because... And I know I'm kind of denying myself some new experiences by doing that. I'm not blind to that. But, and especially after Star Trek Online, with all the pugs that I run in Star Trek Online, team-based games, like online team-based games, they're kind of dicey. Like, it's going to take something a game that I'm really excited for and really love dearly to play, like, team-based games with, like, blind pugs and such. Like Xenoverse later, and I'll be sure to record some of those pugs, because I'm certain in this game they'll be hilarious, even if they're not very good. But in more serious, more competitive settings, no. Like, I play, like, there's a difference in how I play games and how, like, it's kind of a clashing style, essentially. Like, I play games to relax and have a good time. Other people play games to earn a living, or they play games hoping to earn a living on it someday, or they just play a game because it covers a subject that they like, and they like to, like, deeply focus on that subject, and they get very angry when things don't go their way. Either way, there's often a clash, and sometimes those clashes just completely, like, shit on the experience. That was one of the criticisms Japanese players had of Western players on PSO servers. Is they based Western players got onto the Japanese servers when they wouldn't localize it here, when Sega wouldn't localize Phantasy Star Online 2 here, and they basically adopted one of the server rooms for Western users, and Japanese users who often design characters who are flexible and can like meet shifting situational demands, would often be put off by Western players who have pre-mades, essentially, built for certain tasks, and would be upset if you weren't doing your specific task. That sort of stuff. My philosophy is a lot more towards that Japanese style of an all-around character who can handle various kinds of different situations. That sort of jack of all trades, master of none type character. I really like that kind of character, and that puts me at odds with a lot of people. Even people I know, even people I like. And this isn't really at odds, but for the longest time, like we haven't argued or anything, but for the longest time, Andrew's been trying to get me to trade in, or had been trying to get me to trade in, the Waglinde that I have now for a Dreadnought or something, and I'm like, no, I'm good. I have a handle on how this ship works. This is my ship, There are many like it, but this one is mine. And I know how this ship works. I know I have this ship down to an art at this point, and I'm comfortable with it. And I'm comfortable with whatever challenges the game will throw at me in this ship. And I may not be up to it at first. Like, I may not be up to a new challenge at first, but I'll figure it out. I'll figure out a way to use my advantages against their disadvantages, and I'll kick its ass, eventually. That's part of the fun of the game for me, is having to, like, figure out a situation with what I've got on hand like they would have on the show. That was kind of part of the fun for me. And that's part of the fun for me in a lot of games. So, yeah. But it's not a part of a lot of fun for a lot of other people who take those games really seriously. And that, aside from, like I said, just not knowing that many people who play those games, pretty much kind of robs the fun of those games for me. So, yeah. Would like to someday, though. Might play them. And if I do ever play them, I'll be sure to record it so you can see my reactions or any douchebaggery that ensues. And I think that's it for the questions for this week. So, if you've got any questions, submit your questions in the comments or in the comments here on YouTube or in the comments on the website blog post linked in the description, and I will answer your questions in the next. Still trying to figure out a better name for this thing. In a couple weeks, it's a bi-weekly podcast, and next week will be the next update of Resident Evil Revelations, which I'm hoping will have a fair deal more footage than the. It was still a couple hours of footage last week, but there should be more this week. So until then, this is Alchemisted, and I will see you guys later.